You smell it before you understand it. Salt in the air, a horizon that does not end, and water stretching farther than any river you have ever seen. You have reached the ocean. But when did that happen for the first time? There is no archaeological site that preserves the exact moment an ancient human walked over a hill, saw the sea, and stopped. No footprint tells you what that person thought. No fossil records surprise. And no shell can tell you whether the person who picked it up had seen the ocean 100 times before. So the real question is slightly different. When do you first see evidence that ancient humans were not simply standing beside the ocean, but understanding it, returning to it, and using it? That question has an answer, and the answer takes you to the southern coast of Africa. Imagine walking toward a cliff roughly 164,000 years ago. The climate is difficult. Much of Africa is cooler and drier than it is today. The coastline is not exactly where you expect it to be because sea level changes over time. Ahead of you is a cave. Below it is the sea. This place is called Pinnacle Point 13B on the southern coast of South Africa. Archaeologist Curtis Moran and his colleagues reported evidence there showing that humans were eating marine shellfish around 164,000 years ago. That is one of the earliest clear pieces of evidence that Homo sapiens had begun using marine resources. Think about what collecting shellfish actually requires. You cannot simply walk to the water at any moment and expect the same result. Tides expose some rocks and cover others. Waves make certain places dangerous. Shellfish live in specific zones. Some can be gathered efficiently only when the water retreats. So the ocean is not just food, it is a schedule. To use it repeatedly, you begin learning when the shore opens and when it closes. You notice the moon, even if you do not understand gravity. You notice recurring changes in water level. You remember which rocks become accessible. You learn where waves strike hardest. Would the first coastal humans have understood tides the way you do today? Almost certainly not in scientific terms. But they did not need equations. They needed patterns. This is one of the most important things about human intelligence. You can use a system before you understand why the system exists. A child can learn that a fire burns before understanding chemistry. A hunter can predict animal movement without understanding population ecology. And a coastal forager can learn when shellfish appear without knowing anything about orbital mechanics. At Pinnacle Point, the evidence also includes ochre, a mineral pigment often rich in iron that can produce red or yellow color. Some pieces were deliberately modified. That matters because the people at the shore were not simply starving animals crawling toward the nearest food. They were carrying tools. They were processing material. They were making choices. The coast had become part of a human world. But here is the first reversal. The people at Pinnacle Point almost certainly did not discover the ocean. They are simply among the earliest people whose coastal behavior has survived clearly enough for archaeologists to detect. The real first encounter could be much older. Why is it so difficult to find? Because coastlines move. During colder periods, huge amounts of water become locked in continental ice. Sea level falls. Land that is underwater today becomes dry coastal plain. Then the ice melts and the sea rises again. That means many ancient beaches are gone, not erased, drowned. A camp that once sat beside a beach may now lie beneath tens of meters of seawater. This creates a huge archaeological bias. You can only excavate what is still accessible. So when archaeologists say the earliest known evidence is around 164,000 years old, that does not mean nobody touched the ocean before that date. It means the surviving evidence becomes convincing around that time. And the story does not stay in South Africa. Move north. Around 125,000 years ago, humans were using another African coastline beside the Red Sea in what is now Eritrea, at a place known as the Abdur Reef Terrace. Geologist Robert Walter and his colleagues found Middle Stone Age tools in association with an ancient reef environment. The geological setting showed that humans occupied the coast and exploited nearshore marine resources. Now the pattern is harder to dismiss. You have evidence from the southern end of Africa. You have evidence from the northeastern side of Africa. The sea is becoming part of human geography. But what would a day at the coast actually feel like? Forget the modern beach. There are no umbrellas, no fishing boats, no weather forecast, no sandals protecting your feet from sharp rock. You approach the intertidal zone, the strip of shore covered at high tide and exposed at low tide. The surface is slippery. Waves break unpredictably. Barnacles and shells cut skin. A wrong step can throw you into water, and the sea keeps moving. You learn quickly. One person watches the water. Another pries shellfish from rock. Children may learn which pools are safe. Someone carries the food back. The group returns before the rising tide traps them against the cliff. This exact scene is a reconstruction. but the behavior behind it is supported by the archaeological remains. The most valuable change is not the shellfish itself. It is the new way of thinking. Inland food often moves, animals migrate, herds disappear, plants change with seasons. But some coastal foods can be found repeatedly in predictable places. That creates a different kind of opportunity. The ocean may look chaotic, but parts of it are extremely regular. Tides return. Shellfish beds remain attached to rock. Stranded animals appear. Fish become trapped in pools. Seabirds nest in predictable places. The edge between land and water becomes a giant information system. That changes how you move through the day. Instead of following only animal tracks across open land, you can return to the same strip of rock and expect opportunities to reappear. You can watch the water retreat, collect quickly, and leave before the route becomes dangerous again. The coast rewards memory. It also rewards patience. If the water is too high, you wait. If waves are too violent, you move elsewhere. If one pool has been emptied, another section of shore may still be productive. And because several people can collect at once, knowledge can spread through observation. A child does not need to discover every dangerous rock personally. Someone can point, someone can demonstrate, someone can stop them before the next wave arrives. That makes the shoreline more than a source of calories. It becomes a classroom. Every visit teaches something about timing, risk, animals, weather, and place. And every successful return makes the sea slightly less mysterious than it was before. And your ancestors learn to read it. Later sites make that relationship even clearer. At Blombo's Cave on the southern coast of South Africa, people were collecting shellfish tens of thousands of years after Pinnacle Point. Researchers studying the site have shown that shellfish use changed as the distance between the cave and coastline changed. That detail is fascinating. The ocean itself was moving relative to the people. When sea level dropped, the beach could move farther away. The cave stayed where it was. The food moved with the coast, so humans had to adjust. At Blombo's, shellfish collection appears to have been influenced by distance, availability, and which species were worth carrying back. That means you are no longer looking at a human who simply discovers that shells contain meat. You are looking at decisions. Which species gives the best return? How far is the walk? How much can you carry? Is the tide right? Is the trip worth the energy? This is economics before money, and it is happening on a prehistoric shoreline. There is another surprising part of the story. Homo sapiens were not the only humans capable of using the sea. At Bajandio Cave in southern Spain, researchers reported evidence that Neanderthals were gathering shellfish by roughly 150,000 years ago. That destroys a simple story in which one brilliant group of modern humans suddenly discovers seafood, and everyone else remains afraid of the coast. Different human populations could learn coastal resources independently. The ocean was not one invention. It was a repeated discovery. A coastline appears. Humans explore it. Someone touches a shell. Someone opens it. Someone notices that low tide reveals more. The behavior becomes knowledge. Knowledge becomes routine. Routine becomes culture. And then something even bigger happens. Eventually, humans stop treating the sea only as an edge. They begin crossing water. By around 65,000 years ago, archaeological evidence from Medjedbebe shows humans living in northern Australia. Chris Clarkson, Zenobia Jacobs, and their colleagues dated human occupation there to around that time, reaching the ancient continent of Sahul, which joined Australia and New Guinea when sea levels were lower, still required crossing stretches of water from island Southeast Asia. There was no complete dry land bridge. That means by the time people reached Sahul, the relationship with water had changed dramatically. The sea was no longer only a place where food waited at low tide. It was something humans could enter deliberately. Now imagine that step. The shore behind you becomes smaller. The water below has no path. You cannot walk home. Whatever vessel carries you is made from materials that usually decay, which is why the archaeology of the first boats is so frustratingly invisible. Wood disappears. Fiber rots. Reeds vanish. But people appear on the other side. That is the evidence. You do not need the boat to survive archaeologically when the destination proves that some kind of water crossing happened. Was that the moment humans conquered the ocean? No, not even close. For most of history, the sea remained terrifying. Storms killed. Currents carried people away. Deep water hid animals. Fresh water could become scarce on journeys. A coast could feed you one day and destroy you the next. The important change was not fear disappearing. It was knowledge becoming stronger than fear. This is the same pattern you see again and again in human evolution. Fire is dangerous. You learn to control it. Predators are dangerous. You learn to predict them. Cold is dangerous. You learn clothing and shelter. The ocean is dangerous. You learn timing, coastlines, currents, boats, and routes. You do not become physically adapted to the sea like a dolphin. You remain a land animal. That is what makes the story strange. Your body is badly designed for the ocean. You cannot drink seawater. You cannot breathe underwater. You lose heat quickly when wet. You swim far more slowly than marine predators. And yet humans eventually reach almost every major habitable landmass on Earth. How? Not because your body changes fast enough, because your behavior travels faster than evolution. A shellfish bed becomes a remembered resource. A tide becomes a schedule. A beach becomes a route, a raft becomes a possibility, an island on the horizon becomes a destination, and information passes from one generation to the next. That may be the real meaning of discovering the ocean. It was probably not one dramatic morning. It was thousands of mornings. One person learns where shellfish grow. Another learns when the water retreats. Someone remembers the safest path down the rocks. Someone else notices a distant coastline beyond the water. The ocean slowly changes from a boundary into a landscape. That is the counterintuitive reversal. You might think humans discovered the sea when they first saw it, but seeing something is not the same as discovering what it can do. Your ancestors may have looked at coastlines for hundreds of thousands of years before the surviving archaeological record shows them systematically turning the shore into food, knowledge, and eventually movement. The greatest discovery was not that the ocean existed. It was that the ocean had patterns. Today, you stand on a beach and the horizon feels peaceful. You check the tide on your phone. You eat seafood caught far offshore. You board ships that cross entire oceans. You fly over water your ancestors once approached one slippery rock at a time. But the beginning was much smaller. A retreating wave, an exposed shell, a hand reaching down, a memory that the water would return. You began this story standing before an endless horizon, wondering when ancient humans discovered the ocean. The answer is that they probably discovered it many times. First as water, then as food, then as a pattern, and finally as a road.